talking about? It's a bad callback. I think it's funny. Again, I think it's funny, but I think it has its place. Maybe later in the episode, I could have figured something else out. If you're doing creative stuff, music's a bit different, kind of. But with podcasters, I always give this advice to podcasters. Every episode is someone's first episode. Podcasts that are very in-joke heavy are very hard to get into. The existing fans love them because it feels like they're part of a community. Hey, Macaroni, let's all go down to the train. Then we're going to meet a little man you all know his name. Hi, everybody. And if you're an existing, you like that, this show could have become that. I think the most quote-unquote in-joke thing I have are the vehicles, and those aren't even funny. Like, I mean, it's kind of funny. Like, we need a mode of transportation. It's something that popped up. It wasn't in the original episodes, but early on, I started talking about the Carpenter Copter. If you've never heard an episode before and I say, hey everyone, let's hop inside the Jason Jalopy, you know my name, because I say it at the beginning of the episode. If you listen to the podcast, you're like, oh, Jason Carpenter, Carpenter Copter, Jason Jalopy, Dead Rabbit Dune Buggy, Dead Rabbit Dreadnought, the Rabbit Rowboat. These aren't in-jokes. Imagine if they were called the Hansmobile. The people who know who Hans are, God bless you, would laugh. But other people would be like, wait, why is it called a Hansmobile? That doesn't make any sense. So I listen to a lot of podcasts that are in-joke heavy. And I remember I was listening to a podcast that's very in-joke heavy, and I remember I was probably 30 episodes into it, and it was funny because I knew what the joke was, but I remember thinking, oh man, if this was my first episode, I'd have no idea what was going on. So that was, even before I started doing a podcast, I realized that every episode is someone's first episode. Actually, I think that's not original. I think that was one of the editors of Marvel Comics said that. I think that's where I picked that up from. One of the editors of Marvel Comics said, one of you other comic nerds out, I'm a big comic book nerd. I haven't read comic books in a long time, but I miss them. That's one of the things I really miss. But it's not like they've been destroyed during the nuclear holocaust. My little brother actually said I should check out the Power Rangers comic book. He said they're doing some good stuff over at Boom. But what was I talking about? This is pretty much how I am in real life. The podcast itself gets more edited. This will be slightly edited, but what was I talking about? Comic books? So there was a Marvel editor who said his demand to the writers of the comic books was every issue is someone's first issue. So in every issue, you had to have Wolverine be like, that's nothing for my healing factor. Because there'd be people who'd never known that. You didn't have to go out of the way. They didn't have to go, like, Professor X, how'd you get in a wheelchair? And he has to go on for that. But he goes, every issue is someone's first issue. Every podcast is someone's first podcast. So that's a very long-winded way to talk about that. I don't like the placement of that. Looking back, I probably didn't need to do it. It was kind of a funny bit. I did feel bad about people who work on Lifetime movies. Like, that was a true reason why I did that, but it was a bad place for it. The episode, it's funny because the bulk of the episode, the Multiverse Abides, stands on its own. It really does stand on its own. I think Hoots Cheech, again, when he recommended this, I go, I remember that episode. I remember that story. It's one of those great stories, but you'll notice that I did something in this episode that I very rarely do. And I told it first person. And it's funny because when I was re-listening, I just listened to this episode really not too long ago. That was the first thing that caught my ear. I remember when I was recording it, I originally didn't do it that way. Because there's a lot of times there's rough drafts. I record it pretty much in one shot. Generally, when I sit down, I don't get up till it's recorded. And sometimes it's like trying to fit a hammer through an eye of a needle. I don't know if that's an analogy, but it's hard sometimes. And sometimes I'll do multiple takes and things like that. And this one I remember saying, and then he was driving down the road, and then he almost hit the car, but the car kept going, and then the wheel showed up, and blah, 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 and it wasn't working. The only way you could tell this story was first person. It would have been way too abstract, and it would have put you and me out of the story if I was like, and then the guy's flipping in the wheel. We had to be in the wheel with him to really get this story. So by me being in the wheel, that brought you into the wheel. But that was a controversial decision, and I can't think of many other stories that didn't actually involve me that I used first person. This may be alone. Mormon Bigfoot, because I'm reading that guy's exact words. That is... But again, I'm reading from, like, his journal. I actually went back in time and got a guy's driving down the road, and a ghost walks out with one leg. I very rarely, I can't really think of another time. So I'm driving down the road with my buddy and I see a ghost. Like, it just doesn't work. But this story could only be done that way. I remember I started to record it as if I was telling a story, like a third-person story, and I remember halfway through being like, this is garbage and it doesn't work at all. So I had to reformat it. Let's go ahead, though. So I think that that was the behind-the-scenes thing. Other than that, it's a terrifying story. It's one of those stories that I think, I guess I'm not done talking about it. It's a terrifying story. It's one of those stories that it kind of makes you think makes you more afraid of death. Because it's so chaotic, isn't it? It's so chaotic. It's not like this peaceful light. It's this swirling machination of the universe. So, yeah, it was really a chilling story. But at the same time, if you're a fan of reincarnation or quantum suicide, it's I guess, heartwarming. Hey, yeah, heartwarming. You get worm in you. Heartwarming. I think that if he hadn't remembered any of it, and it was just like, oh, I was driving, I thought I died, I had a flash of an alternate life, and the next thing I know, I was there, that would be fine. But the idea of just the cold, mechanized violence, the uncaring universe spinning you around, shuffling you, is very violent imagery. But a very, very good story. Let's talk about Donald Trump and UFOs. I actually had thought about covering this on the episode, doing an episode on this, but I was like, no, we talked about it before. I didn't remember what episode it was, so Hoots Cheech really knocked it out of the park by picking... All the Patreons picked great episodes this week, but Hoots Cheech, when I was listening to this episode, I go, oh, that's the episode I talked about. It'll be great. I can wrap this story up. Once again, Donald Trump was asked about UFOs, and once again, Donald Trump gave a very Donald Trump-esque answer that left everyone kind of scratching their heads. So let's take a look at this. October 11th, he was being interviewed on Fox News by Maria Bartiromo. It was like I believe a Fox business show. It's called like Sunday Morning Futures. I don't think they were having like prognosticators. I don't think they were having fortune tellers there. Was supposed to be that joke, if I knew that word. But Maria asks Trump about the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force. We've talked about it on the show. It's been in the news a lot. That's the Department of Defense's organization, group. They're looking at what we would call UFOs. They don't call them UFOs. They call them Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, which makes sense because that would include clouds and all sorts of stuff. Like, it's not actually a flying object. That's probably the difference. But anyway, so she asks, I'll read this just like I did earlier in this quote, because you kind of have to take Trump, you kind of have to read his words. You don't want to take stuff and pick stuff, because then it really doesn't make sense. She says, Mr. President, as we wrap up here, are there UFOs? This is his response. Well, I'm going to have to check on that. I mean, I've heard that. I heard that 2 days ago, so I'll check on that. I'll take a good, strong look at that. I will tell you this. We now have created a military, the likes of which we've never had before in terms of equipment. The equipment that we have, the weapons that we have, and hopefully, hope to God we never have to use them. Russia, China, they're all envious of what we have. All built in the USA. We've rebuilt it. $2.5 trillion. As far as the other question, I'll check on it. I heard about it 2 days ago, actually. So that's why we have to read it in context, because there's basically two things going on here that I've seen a lot of conspiracy theorists blend together, and he separates it. If we took out that last sentence, it sounds like he's talking about, yeah, I've heard UFOs exist. I heard that 2 days ago, and I'll get back to you on that. By the way, the United States has weapons that Russia and China don't have. Mighty weapons, great weapons. We've never had before in terms of equipment, things like that. And then he goes, and so I've seen stuff on a bunch of conspiracy forums. Did he just announce that we have like alien tech? Is he letting Russia and China know that we have alien tech? We have these weapons that have never been seen, but that's not what he says. And reading the whole quote, you can clearly see what it says. I could easily take two sentences out of that. I can say, well, I'm going to have to check on that. I mean, I've heard that. I will tell you this, we now have created a military, the likes of which we've never had before. You see how just by eliminating a sentence, you have the idea that Trump is disclosing alien tech to Russia and China. That's not what he's doing. Obviously, this is what President Trump does. He will start saying something. I do it too, and I think most people do it, and they don't realize how much they do it. Now that I record myself all the time, I realize I actually have to edit it out a lot. Well, and you guys have heard it during this outro. I'll start talking, I'll get sidetracked, start talking about something else, and then I'll bounce back to the original topic. That's what he's talking about. He's like, oh, UFOs again. Yeah, sure. He starts answering the UFO question. Yeah, I'll figure that out. And then, since he's like on television, he's going to talk trash to Russia and China. He's going to talk about $2.5 trillion of new military equipment. And then he goes, oh, yeah, but back to the other question. Let's talk about, I heard that 2 days ago. So there's a clear, he's not connecting the two. He's not connecting the two at all. And I can tell you, one of the ways we can tell where he's not connecting the two is that when he says that they were built in the USA and they cost $2.5 trillion, if it was alien tech, I don't think it would be built in the USA. I definitely don't think it would cost $2.5 trillion because it's alien tech, right? It's free. If we're getting it off spaceships, we don't really need to go to Lockheed Martin. I guess if you're selling the ion disruptor to Lockheed Martin or donating it to them or whatever, you give it to them and they fix it up and then charge you for it. Like, you just use the disruptor on them. You're like, here's your payment, Mr. Lockheed and Mr. Martin. They're like, no, I'm just CEO, so it's on my last name. But anyways, people are going to believe what they want to believe. I believe everyone has the capacity to change their mind. I believe everyone has the capacity to see new information, and because we see it happen the other way, right? We see people who are fairly rational people start believing that they can stare at the sun, or start believing in flat earth or something like that. And you're like, oh yeah, I went to high school with the guy, I went to college with the guy, he was pretty well put together. And then they start talking about NASA and oranges and all sorts of craziness. See, that's an inside joke. You can have rational people become crazy, so I believe, and I know for a fact that you can have crazy people, crazy in exclamation points, believing that reptilians are taking over the planet person. But you can have someone to go, oh yeah, I was wrong. But it's really hard to, because like I've talked about this several times on the show, I used to be a big conspiracy theorist. I used to believe 9/11 was an inside job. I never believed that reptilians were taking over the planet, but I did believe, and I do believe there's probably alien activity on the planet and stuff like that. As much as I poo-poo reptilians, there's probably an reptilian race out there. We haven't had UFO encounters with them. Not poo-pooing the idea of reptilians. I'm not even poo-pooing the idea of them being on planet Earth. I just don't think the Queen of England's one of them. But I did believe in a bunch of conspiracy theories, and I stopped. And the thing is that the more you put it on Facebook that you believe in this insane conspiracy theory, and people are mocking you, the harder it is for you to walk back from that. Because then eventually you're going to be like, oh, I was wrong. Your fear is that your friends on Facebook are going to be like, we told you so. So you start doubling down rather than being like, oh, that was... If you make a bad investment in a business and it fails, you go, oh, I probably could have run the business better, but the business failed. You don't keep investing money into the ruins of a store. Someone else buys your business and you're like giving them money, investing money. That's not how it works. There's a lot of things that we do walk away from. A bad relationship, someone who's super toxic. Eventually, you were in love with them at some point, but it just wasn't working out, and some people keep putting gas on that fire, it gets bigger and bigger. But generally, when you walk away from it, you walk far away from it. When it comes to conspiracy theory, or really beliefs of any kind, when people confront you about it, you tend to double down on them. When you find information that is contradictory to what you believe, you can double down on it, or you can start believing that stuff, and then you just kind of go from there. But it is hard to admit. It wasn't hard for me, honestly. I was like, oh, that was dumb. I believed all that stuff. That was dumb. And I may do that for conspiracy theories I believe in the future. Like, I'm still enjoy conspiracy theories. I still believe in conspiracy theories, but not dumb ones. But see, that's funny, because 10 years from now, I might be like, oh, dude, I can't believe that I thought Lady Gaga was a murderer. I don't know. It's gonna take a while. That's gonna take a while. But you know what I mean? Like, I could be swayed on that. She's coming up behind me with a knife. She's like, say I'm not a murderer. I was like, you're not a murderer. So, you know, who knows? Who knows? That one's so weird. But my point is that I've totally lost my... This is a perfect example. I was originally talking about Donald Trump and UFOs, and then I went off on this weird tangent. So you could easily edit that up to me saying that Donald Trump admitted 9/11. You know what I mean? But that's how people's brains are. I don't even know where I was going with that. But I do believe people can change. That's the thing. I do believe people can change. People who believe, that's fine if you believe that governments may have alien technology. I'm not dismissing that. I don't think that's what Donald Trump was talking about. That's my thing. Right. I don't think that. I believe that there's probably some form of alien technology in the hands of somebody, but I don't believe it's Lockheed Martin. And I don't believe that our current fighting forces are going to be running out in Veritech fighters anytime soon. So, Donald Trump is, again, very blunt